In example 4, they're asking us to find functions f and g so that f composed with g is equal to h. Now, as you look at this, the problem, example 4, is actually asking us to take some of the ideas that we talked about back in example 1a and do the opposite operation. So in example 1a, we had two different rules. We had a rule for f and we had a rule for g. Then we took those two separate rules and we brought them together and created a new rule for f composed with g. Well, this problem is asking us to do just the opposite operation. They're going to give us the rule for f composed with g, and then they're going to ask us for the individual rules for f and g. What's the separate rule for f, and then the separate rule for g, in order to make f composed with g happen the way that they've requested. Now, in order to do this problem, you have to think about who are you doing first and who are you doing second. And we're going to do those kinds of ideas in two different worlds, and then we're going to bring them together. So the first thing I have to do is figure out who am I doing first and who am I doing second when I think about this at the rule level. Now, in order to do that problem, sometimes people struggle with that a little bit, so I'm going to go off to the side and just talk more about that idea. So let's think about this in terms of an xy table. We have an x, we have a y, and that y is equal to the square root of 2x minus 1. Well, if I choose an x value of 5 here, we're going to end up having then a y value of the square root of 2 times 5 minus 1. And when I'm talking about who's first and who's second, what I'm asking about is, when you do this particular calculation, is the very first thing that you do the square root? Or is the very first thing that you multiply the 2 times the 5 and then subtract the 1 from that? So let's think about this. Do I start by taking a square root of somebody? No. The very first thing that I do when I do this calculation is I need to multiply the 2 times the 5 and then subtract 1 from that. 2 times 5, that's going to be 10. Subtract 1 from that, we're going to have 9. Now, once I'm done with that 2 times 5 minus 1, then I come back, and the second thing that I do is a square root. And the square root of 9 ends up being 3. So when you look at this problem, there are two different pieces that had to happen. I had to calculate a 2x minus 1. And that was the very first thing that had to be calculated when I was thinking about this particular calculation. And then once I got that all done, then I came back, and the second part of this problem was the square root. So now that we've thought about it at the rule level, let's talk about it at the composition level. Remember once again that f composed with g of x is defined to be f of g of x. Well, again, order of operations tells us that we start on the inside and work our way out. So the very first thing that we do here is find g of x. And then once we have that answer, we come back and plug that answer into the function f. So our second operation is to play with the function f. So now what we need to do then is combine the two worlds. The first thing that I did here was find 2x minus 1. And the first thing that I did here was named g of x. So that means then my g of x has to be 2x minus 1. Now, let's figure out what's happening with the seconds. Over here, my second thing that I played with was my function f. So I have f of x. What was the f doing over here? The second thing that happened over here was that I took the square root of somebody. Now, sometimes people will come in and they'll try to force that 2x minus 1 here in the world of f. We already played with the 2x minus 1. I'm done with that part. The second part is only about the square root. So what I have to do then is find a function that only takes the square root of somebody. Well, I have a function called square root of x. That function takes whatever I give to it, and it takes the square root of that. So in fact, we just accomplished what this problem asked us to do. Our g of x on this problem is 2x minus 1, and our f of x is equal to the square root of x. Now once again, you want to make sure that you're not doubling up on information. So if you've already used the 2x minus 1 as part of g, it should not be part of your function f. Now, if you want to check this, you can go ahead and go back and use the same ideas we talked about in example 1a, and you can actually find f composed with g here, and f composed with g will be exactly the same as this h of x.